Hi, everybody. This is Karsten Voges along with Gene Gearing with our guest Brian Cameron. Gene and I, we're hosting these LinkedIn Lives. We are CIO advisors in Europe and North America. And our LinkedIn Live sessions are really for CIOs, enterprise architects, IT leaders, practitioners, and we really want to bring together the community here, bridge the gap between kind of like business strategies, strategic thinking, but also IT execution. This is a more informal discussion to connect on industry market trends, some challenges, some things that go on with strategy execution, business architecture, and we have lots of guests on our monthly LinkedIn Live sessions here. If you hear live, you can also ask questions to this, and you might be looped in, or your question might be looped in. If you have this as a recording on our Lean Academy, there are no chances to ask questions, but we welcome you as well. So make sure to also subscribe and look at kind of like the previous sessions, but also the upcoming ones. We have some on that going on as well. And thanks, Nana, for looping that in. So there is also recordings available. So, Gene, tell us a little bit about who has joined us today here.
So so Dr. Brian Cameron has joined us, and I have read multiple bios of Brian, and I've known him for several years, and I always refer to him as a trailblazer. So I Googled, what is a trailblazer? Well, it's someone who can overcome different challenges and isn't afraid to do it, and they create a new path and opportunity for others, which he did for me. So his other hats, besides being a trailblazer in EA, MBA, is he's the clinical professor and associate dean of graduate programs and executive education at Penn State. He wears numerous hats. He's a strategic director for the Center of Enterprise Architecture at the College of Information Sciences and Technology. He's also the founder and emeritus president of FIPO. And in his current role, he's recognized for growing professional graduate programs at Penn State from 4 to 17 master's programs, I believe, including the master's in EA and business transformation and certificate degrees in EA and BA. On top of that, he's won numerous awards. I was actually present when he got one from Obama, a letter from Obama. He serves on several boards and working committees and international professional organizations, including the Special Interest Group on EA for the Industry Advisor Council of the U.S. government. So on top of that, he's a senior consultant with Qatar Consortium in his spare time. And he's with the business and EA practice. So he's got a couple articles, recent articles out, and we wanted to touch on those a little bit, but let me introduce you to Brian.
All right. Thank you for that introduction, Gene. Pleasure to be here today. Great to see both of you again.
Yeah.
So just a few things to tee things off. My current area of focus is business architecture as a facilitator of strategy execution. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a graduate course that I teach around strategic business architecture. It's unique. I haven't seen anything like it anywhere else. And again, it's focusing on strategy execution and how business architecture, if applied appropriately, can create that line of sight between strategy and project level execution. And this is really resonating with strategic planning people and other business people from all over the globe. I've created quite a following in the course now from many of our master's programs. So I'm happy to talk more about the work that we're doing in business architecture. We've also done some research looking at how strategy execution is taught in primarily American higher education, but I think this would translate to Europe as well. And the big hole that we found in this research and how we teach strategy execution and how business architecture could fill that hole. So I'm happy to talk about that as well. But I'll turn it back to you folks, and we can take this in whatever direction you like.
Well, on the one article you wrote that to me you were poking the bear, because it was the way most of us build IT strategies. You pointed out that we can't really do it that way anymore. We need to have a new perspective, and that it has to be more not really separate from the business, but part of the business, as I understood it. And also, you pointed out that EA is not effective without a well-developed BA component, business and architecture component. So, and I think one of the things that, I mean, both very valid, but one of them was the job of IT strategy isn't to align the business, it's to provide IT capabilities. I think that was the one that really stuck with me. And I thought, now we got to stop thinking of business as something to align to and start thinking of it as something of which we're part of, right? IT is part of. So
right.
Can you expound on that a little bit? Because
yeah, and this isn't just me. I mean, you see people, different analysts, and Gartner and Forrester and others that kind of get it and are talking this way as well. So this isn't something that's unique to just my perspective, but I think it's more of a contemporary, pragmatic perspective. After decades of looking at what's worked and what hasn't worked, it's more of a pragmatic perspective. So I think there's a couple things to unpack there. One, that IT is just another part of the business. I talk with CIOs, and they'll say in a meeting, I shouldn't be able to tell who the IT people are and who the business people are. They should all be right there with the same concepts and same understanding. Couldn't agree more. I do think, though, I'll get on just a bit of a tangent for a few minutes. I do think our educational systems, at least in the US, perpetuate that divide. Many of our IT people are in computer science departments where they get very little business understanding and training and experience. And conversely, in our business schools, we don't provide very deep understanding of enterprise technology. It's today the focus is more around analytics and data analytics, which are it's an important topic. Don't get me wrong, but if you look at being able to have a conversation and understand different perspectives, the technical people need to have as good of a foundation in business concepts as they do technology. And conversely, I would argue your business people have to be able to hold their own as well and have an understanding of enterprise technology concepts, which in many cases they don't. So I think we got a lot of work to do there from an educational perspective to create these type of individuals that I think we need for the future. Then second area you brought up is this alignment argument. And I've got videos out there, different articles out there where I really tear this apart. Because I've looked at this for, close to 25, 30 years. And, I started out believing, the traditional, IT strategy needs to align directly with business strategy, and that's possible. And that's the holy grail. And that's what we should all be striving for.
That's what everybody's builds their IT strategies around.
Yeah. But if you start reading what different folks, and again, like I said, I'm not the only one talking this way. But if you think about it logically, and I think some of this is in the paper that you've mentioned, and it's in some other papers that I've written. If you look at the work Michael Porter has done, I think most people are familiar with Porter. He's been around for quite a while. He'll tell you that most organizations, high percentage, 80, if you read other analyst reports, they might even be higher than 80% fail to execute their business strategies, either in part or in whole. And then he goes on to say that in any given organization, less than 5% of the people even understand what the strategy is at that point in time.
Yeah,
true.
Strategy is not a static thing. It changes, especially in some industries, it changes quite frequently. So you've got something that's changing frequently, less than 5% of the people understand. How in the world are you ever going to align to something like that? It's just, I mean, conceptually, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. We should all be in alignment and singing Kumbaya. And, theoretically, it makes sense. But pragmatically, it doesn't work. So and what I teach in my class is that there's an interim alignment mechanism that is more of a pragmatic approach to alignment. It's not that we just give up on alignment. It's that we figure out how to pragmatically link strategy and changes in strategy. So it's an ongoing process, changes in strategy to tactical level execution, which is typically in the form of projects, project portfolios, et cetera. And if you don't have that alignment, then your project portfolios, which are typically very, everything we do involves technology today. So you can't do a project, so they're typically, have a large IT component, but they quickly get out of alignment with strategy. You're doing the wrong projects or the wrong priority of the projects because you're not in tune with, the current strategic direction of the organization. And you see this in organization after organization. Or they may not even know that their projects are not in alignment. People think they're doing the right projects, but they really aren't. So that interim alignment mechanism, and there's much more to this, obviously, than we're going to get into in this short time, but understanding your capabilities and your business capabilities. If you think about this just at a high level, the owners of the business capabilities are in tune or should be in tune with changes in business strategy. So as business strategy changes, you might need new capabilities. You might need to change your current capabilities. Maybe there's some capabilities you don't need anymore and they need to be decommissioned. So that interim alignment mechanism with the capabilities and the capability owners tend to be more in alignment with changes in business strategy. And then in turn are that interim alignment mechanism to help then direct what type of projects should be done. So we're not trying to align directly from strategy to strategy because the IT strategy, another component of IT strategy, those of you that have been in the IT world know this, you just don't change your IT infrastructure like that, okay? It's a weighty thing to change, okay? It takes a lot. So you just can't turn things on a dime. So that's why, back to your point, or the point I make in the paper, the goal should be to be a provider of capabilities to the organization and a provider of to help you change tact when you need to, not to try to align directly with strategy, but to have a set of flexible capabilities that allow you to pivot when you need to pivot to support changes in the capabilities of the organization, if that makes sense.
And when you say capabilities, just verifying, you're talking about IT capabilities. So IT strategy.
I'm using the same word in two different contexts. So thank you. Yes. Provider of IT capabilities to help you pivot to support the business capabilities of the organization. Okay. So you've got IT capabilities, business capabilities. And that is more of a realistic, pragmatic approach that is actually, actually works.
So have you seen any companies doing this where they're actually?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely. And even so some of the speakers I bring into my class. So, it's a small community out there. You all know, we all know the same people. And there's some people that get it. There's some consulting firms that are actually doing this with clients. So I bring in those perspectives into my class. So yeah, I don't know if I can name drop here or not, but
sure.
Okay. I'll tell you, a friend of mine, Kartik Raval with Fujitsu Consulting, they're doing some good work with their clients around this perspective. Wendy Kuhn also.
Oh, Wendy,
yeah. We had her on a month ago here.
People. So she's doing good work with this mindset with her clients as well. And what's really gratifying to me, so this isn't just an academic theoretical exercise. This is from my own, experience consulting with organizations. I've been in industry before I went into academia, but then also in my classes. So these are all, my classes are all working professionals. So these are online master's programs. I got working professionals all over the globe. And with the first exercise I have them do in my class is seek out who does strategic planning in your organization. Okay, get as high as you can. Some will get all the way up to the C level. Some, depending on the size of the organization, maybe they get to a divisional vice president. It varies how high people are able to go. But it opens a door into a world that most of them haven't been exposed to. So then we start talking about issues. So I give them a script. And essentially they're asking them questions around problems with strategy execution. And every organization has problems with strategy execution. And then, then we ask, are you familiar with this emerging discipline of business architecture? Sometimes yes, oftentimes no. and it sparks interest. So when you have problems, you have something that, at least on the surface, sounds like it might be able to help us solve our problems, and it creates this ongoing relationship. And in some cases, people actually get job offers from their strategic planning groups to bring this perspective to their strategic planning groups. I've had that happen maybe in half a dozen cases. But the problem is that business architecture, again, if it's set up right and staffed right, those are two big caveats. It's can create those linkages, that line of sight between the business strategy and changes in the strategy and your tactical level execution. And that's what you really need to be able to do to execute your strategy. You need to make sure you're executing with the right projects. And really, it's surprised even me how much of a what did I just lose everybody?
No.
Nope, you're there.
All right. Okay. My screen just went black for a second.
Yeah.
It's surprised even me how much of a problem this is in all types of organizations. And I assumed going into this that the strategic planning folks have to have something like business architecture, because they talk about strategy execution. There has to be some kind of methodology, modeling approach, et cetera. Maybe they don't call it business architecture. They call it something else. Maybe they don't use everything, all the tools in business architecture, but they use, something similar. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't exist. There's nothing there. So I have strategic planning people coming into my class saying this is the thing that's been missing, that really it's been missing in the strategy execution equation. So then I just to touch on another paper that Wendy Kuhn and I wrote together. I told Wendy, listen, this is we're really onto something here, and I think part of the reason is, and the research confirmed this, is the way we approach strategy execution in our MBA programs and other business programs. So I said, my gut tells me from what I've seen, we do strategy development fairly well, but we just give lip service to execution, just like it's going to happen somewhere, because out into this black box, and you're just going to execute. The hard part's developing the strategy, when really the hard part's executing. So we did a study in conjunction with another group whose board I sit on, the MBA Roundtable. So we brought together the Business Architecture Guild and the MBA Roundtable to jointly fund a study that we pushed out through the MBA Roundtable to colleges and universities all over the globe. It was primarily a North American response. But we had, over 30 schools, and they submitted their syllabi for their strategy execution courses, or courses where they handled strategy execution. And it was pretty much what I was expecting. We gave high level topics around organizational dynamics, personnel staffing, dealing with conflict and power and influence and things like that. But they're all important topics, but really nothing to speak of on the how. Okay, how do you actually make it work? And how do you make sure that what you're doing at the tactical level is in alignment with where the strategy is at that point in time? Nobody was touching that stuff. And it's because it's hard. I mean, it's hard. So we were doing all the kind of the higher, fluffier stuff, which is still, I shouldn't say fluffier, it's still important topics, but we were only doing part of the equation, not the whole equation, and staying away from the hard, how do you actually make this stuff work? So that showed that, I believe, how we're approaching this stuff in higher ed, it's contributing to the execution problem. And I think the course that I've developed, has been so well received because it really hits something that's needed and nobody else is really hitting like this yet. So I'll stop.
Is the book that you and Wendy are putting together based on this?
Yes, it is.
On the how?
So we're working on a book with Wiley, and it's on the how. That's what got Wiley excited about it. So it's based on the success I've had in the course. I really don't have a good book. There is no good book. So I cobbled together resources from different, variety of different resources in the course. And this book will kind of pull it all together.
Oh, good. Good, good, good. Yeah, because I was going to say when you were talking about strategic planning, I have, Karsten and I work with a lot of C-levels, and we ask about strategic plans, and they're like, "Oh yeah, put it together for us."
Well, what's interesting, my students will come back kind of shocked after talking with their strategic planning people because they didn't realize things were that bad in their organizations. It's like we pull
Yeah,
back the curtain and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I had no idea things were like this in our organization.
yeah.
I said, but that's an opportunity for you. If you can bring some new tools and a new approach and some potential solutions to the table. And that's exactly what's happened in many cases. They said, listen, you've got something here that seems like it would benefit our organization. So the whole course is built to give them the understanding, but then the culminating project is to have an executive briefing document and a set of PowerPoints where they can go back to the people they interviewed at the beginning of the semester and then present what business architecture might be able to do for their organizations.
So one of the comments that you made in that, I think that article we were speaking about was that having a BA practice, business architecture, within or working closely with EA can be a linchpin to bridge strategy to execution. And I'm assuming you're referring to IT strategy. Now, early in my career, when I stood up enterprise architecture, I always had a business architecture component. And then over the years, that's separated. And I have no idea why. And when I go into companies now, and Karsten can talk to this, we'll say, do you have a business? Where's your business architecture live? Right? Where does, we don't have business architecture.
Or it's sometimes it's also very, very hidden. Like, we don't have capabilities, but then months later, it's like, oh no, somebody actually did that, but it's kind of like buried somewhere and kind of like
or it's done in a
in a
part of the organization, but not in a large, not organization wide, or yes, okay,
or nobody knows about it, or it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's part of the business
but not
process. Part of the business process group, but they just played around with it and not really did it. And I think that's kind of like also speaks to your point about kind of like using the business capability as kind of like the step down from the strategy to make it a little bit more tangible for the execution part. But if that step is not there, it's kind of like hard to really go from kind of like the strategy to the execution.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add more to that. And Gene, I'm gonna poke a few more bears here. Okay,
go ahead.
I feel strongly about this, and I've worked with many organizations, as you both have, and I think we've seen a lot of the same stuff out there. So a couple thoughts, or a couple things that I think are needed for success. I've kind of given up, honestly, on the bottom-up approach. I think we need to. This is why I'm focusing on the strategic planning people. And they need to get it, and they need to, I think, and this is happening in a few organizations I've seen. This is not widespread, but I think ultimately, if business architecture is going to be a facilitator of strategy execution, if that's our main umbrella around this discipline, and I'll get different. I'll talk, not everybody agrees with this, but at the end of the day, what are we here to do in our organizations? It's to execute our strategy, right? At the end of the day, nothing else. I mean, that's what we're all here to do. So I would argue that that's where it needs to sit in the long term to be a real strategic resource. So that's why I've kind of moved away from the EA home for, I have moved away from the EA home for business architecture. And I'll come back to that thought in a second. Because I think the Holy Grail needs to be part of strategic planning and have a true enterprise-wide perspective, not just over parts of the enterprise, not just over IT, over the entire enterprise. And that, I think, is the Holy Grail. And that's what Wendy and I are advocating, and it's resonating well. And you've got to get the right people working with the strategic planning people. The problem, well, we've got lots of problems, I think, to make this more widespread. So we've approached some of the strategic planning organizations I thought, wow, it's to be a nice, potential marriage between a group like the Business Architecture Guild and some of the strategic planning groups, but didn't go very far. The strategic planning, all of these, and Gene, you know this, these professional organizations have their revenue models set up, and they've got their constituents. And if they have to share with somebody, they might have to share revenue and all these the politics.
Membership fees. And
well, we got execution covered, and I look at how it's more of what I just described, kind of the high level, not really into the how, and they really don't have it covered. And this is what the strategic planning people that are in my class tell me as well. There's nothing out there like this coming from any of their professional organizations. So there's definitely a marriage or a merger that makes sense. But and honestly, the business architecture people, I don't think want to merge with them either, because they have their own constituents and revenue models, et cetera. It's almost like we need a different organization that takes the best of what these organizations have and pulls it together somehow. But that's a tall order. So I gave up on trying to get the professional organizations to kind of come together as we have in my class, because I just saw that there were business models that prevented that type of collaboration. So I focused then on going after the individuals in strategic planning, and I've got them in my classes now, and they're bringing this back into their strategic planning groups, and it's working, but it's a slow process. And I don't believe that long-term the home for business architecture should be under EA, even though that's where I got started and that's where we all got started. And here's why. So when I see something that works, I go with it. When I see something that's not working, I'm the first one to call it out and say it's not working. Okay. So the BA groups that are still under EA, by and large, now there's exceptions to this. So, I hate to, give a blanket statement, but oftentimes they're more of the IT process modelers or the IT capability modelers. And they're not really a strategy execution resource. They're modeling projects or aspects of the organization needed to understand for a particular project. And that's okay. But that's really low level. So when I go to places, some of the BA professional groups, I see a lot of those lower level process modelers that might be from IT. And there's nothing wrong with what I don't want to disparage what they do, but they're not the people that are going to make this a strategic resource by and large. Okay. You need people that are in strategic planning, that get the big picture, that see, what business architecture can bring to the table and bring it together with strategy development, and not just strategy execution, but also informing strategy development as well. That's another important role. And I don't see enough of those people at some of the BA conferences. I see a lot of the lower level process.
We just spoke about that.
So I think we need kind of a new generation of strategic planning / strategic business architect. And that's why I call my course Strategic Business Architecture, because that's who I'm aiming towards. So, and if you talk to groups like the Business Architecture Guild, if you look back, 15 years ago or so, most of the business architecture groups were under EA. That's where it got its start by and large, and they were sitting the EA groups. Now, according to the Business Architecture Guild and others, about 60% sit outside of IT today under a business function. And less than half, around 40%, still sit under traditional enterprise architecture under IT. So there's been a shift that's been occurring, and hopefully it will continue. Now the question is, what business function are they sitting under? And is it an enterprise business function, or is it, as you both have seen, is it part of the organization that gets it and they're modeling just a part of the organization, but they have limited scope, limited authority, and it's not really an enterprise-wide function?
I agree. The ones that I've seen that have moved over to the business, they're basically doing the same thing they did in EA. They're just under a line of business. So they're supporting that silo. They're modeling, but they're not doing strategy.
Well, and this is why I've taken a totally different approach. We've been trying for years to do a bottom up. Hey, we're here, we're good. You should listen to us, bring us into strategic planning. and that hasn't gotten us very far. It's like, yeah, okay, go back to IT, So, yeah, I mean, come on, let's just be realistic here. So I've taken a different approach. Let's bring the strategic planning people in. That's bringing them into my class. Let's show them what we can do. Let's see first, when I first started this, I wanted to see if it resonated, see if I was really on to what I thought I was on to. And boy, so I started this almost 5 years ago, this class with about 20, 25 people now, and one offering per year. Now I'm doing 2 offerings per year, and I have about 120 to 150 people a year that go through it. And most of them, when I first started, so this is a required course in our enterprise architecture master's program. Almost the whole audience was EA people coming from that program. Originally. Today, they're less than a third of my audience.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Today, the primary audience, 2 master's programs, our online MBA program, and we have an online strategic management and executive leadership. It's a post-MBA master's program, primarily populated by strategic planning people. So I started as an elective course in that program. And I got a few people who find it and they'd come in. Then they told other people, but ignore what you're hearing in the background. So a few of those people came in and loved what they saw and what they learned. They went back and told others. Now it's actually an elective, a major component of that program. So roughly a third of the people or more that come into any given class are strategic planning people.
And I like how you can use the change of your program kind of like as a validation that it's like hitting the right spot and that it's kind of like what's kind of like
these
missing.
are people in industry from corporations all over the globe. So if it wasn't working, I wouldn't be getting the enrollment. So it's
a nice validation
that we're hitting a mark here. And that's what I wish others would pick up on. So this isn't just some academic from Penn State saying, well, theoretically, we should do this. We're actually doing it, and we're having success in companies, and it's really filling a void in the strategy execution landscape.
Okay. So, what can you? Sorry, Gene.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I love kind of like
go ahead. Sorry.
That approach, and I had, I think a year or 2 ago, I had kind of like a client who was like right in that spot where they kind of like worked with, the function was outside of EA, was kind of like organizational development, strategic development. So that kind of like area. With what they struggled with was that they were actually just doing the planning part and kind of like it still missed the bridging to execution. And they said like, oh yeah, we don't have like an application portfolio, and we don't like, they didn't care about kind of like how to come from kind of like the org structures and the business capability and the strategies to some of the like implementation part and execution part. Is there something where you can say people that like don't swing too much into that direction of the pendulum, or like some tips and tricks that you can share to like ensure that you are bridging the gap and really helping with the execution as well?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts, and we actually have something new we're rolling out at Penn State that might be of interest to some folks, which I'll talk about in a minute. So what I advise my students to do is not use the term business architecture when they go into these meetings. Okay, we're talking about strategy execution, because you don't know what you're walking into. And some organizations, they've had a bad experience with EA and BA by association. You don't know if they have a dated perspective of what business architecture is. So you don't want to mention that term too soon, too early, because then you've just set the tone for how they're going to view you. Okay. So I tell them, you walk in, you're taking a strategy execution class. You want to talk about strategy execution issues. And of course, everybody, sure, come on in. Let's hear what you have to say. Then later in the conversation, after you've established a rapport, are you familiar with the emerging discipline of business architecture as a facilitator of strategy execution? And in most cases, it's either no or or, well, I know we have business architecture. That's something under IT. Not sure that it really belongs in strategy execution. You know, you get a variety of responses. So that's why we don't lead with that. And honestly, if there was another term for business architecture that we could use, you know, I would.
We know guys at Gartner. Call them up. They make new names all the time.
Yeah, it's got to be something everybody recognizes and, you know, is enduring, et cetera. I haven't found it yet, and we talk about this in class. So I'm careful on how I use that term. You mentioned portfolio management and application portfolio, the different forms of portfolio management. So this is another poke the bear statement. I think if we're going to do this well, portfolio, and if it's a true enterprise-wide function, so if this is an enterprise-wide function reporting to strategic planning, you got to have control over all of the different layers and of execution. And many organizations I see where they get the planning down, maybe they got the modeling linked, but they don't own the portfolio management component. It reports somewhere else, or they don't have direct authority over portfolio management. So they have to kind of influence, beg, et cetera, to, you know, make sure their projects are where they need them to be. And that's often where it breaks down because they don't control the execution level. And I think portfolio management needs to roll up to all of this, that you need, you know, BA as part of strategic planning, and ultimately portfolio management needs to roll up to that.
When you're talking about portfolio management, typically that lives in IT under PMOs, and there's
bears. Yes. Yeah, I know.
But the area that I run across is that, yeah, you can get this if you can get a strategy, then you need to be able to execute at the value stream. Understand the capability portfolio, you know, portfolio capabilities.
Sure.
Then your value stream, and then your projects really do nothing but support that value stream. That's your portfolios are within value stream.
Spot on, yes. But if you have control down to, in your example, the value stream level, but you don't have control over the project portfolio prioritization to support the value streams, that's where it breaks down. So you got to have control and authority over, you know, end-to-end strategy execution, not just half of it or 3/4 of it, or it won't work, or not work that effectively.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a tall order.
It is, but I think if we don't get it, if you don't start, I mean, so I've done a little bit of consulting not long ago, and I was talking with an organization, and they said just this. So all this great stuff, you know, okay, we get it. We're going to model. We're going to do all this stuff. But, you know, project portfolio, that report's over here. And, that would take our C level to reorganize things, et cetera. I said, okay, but think about this. You get this. You want this to happen. But the piece that is a problem at the execution level, you admit they're a problem. They're hard to work with. You're probably not going to get what you need when you need it. And you're saying we can't change that. I'm saying, well, then there's probably nothing more I can do for you, because you can get all of this other stuff right. And if you can't execute it, you know, what good is all this other work that we've done? Yeah. So that doesn't mean we just walk away from it because it's hard, okay, or because it doesn't traditionally work that way. That means, this is why I'm starting with the strategic planning people. I think you got to get the people on high to get this. And if they say, you know what, this makes sense, we need to have a reorganization, portfolio management needs to roll up to us. You know, they're at a strategitic level, a senior level of the organization. They can make that kind of reorg happen. So that's why I'm focused there now. And one other thought I'll share with you and your audience. We are launching. So what I get from my students, this is great, but you're never a prophet in your own land. Okay, so they're coming back from my class with all this great perspective, et cetera. But not everybody in my organization can go through a 15-week graduate course. So do you have something short, an non-credit executive education series, where I could run people from my organization through it, gets us all thinking along the same line, singing off the same sheet of music, so that, you know, then we can progress in our organization. So we've heard this enough that we're launching this fall. So, and you know, maybe you can send out a link to anybody that's interested. So we're launching this fall, three short courses. One is around strategy development and leadership, and then problems with we start getting into some of the problems with strategy execution in that course. Then a version of my graduate course where we really get into more about the strategy execution issues and how business architecture can facilitate effective strategy execution. So that's the second course. Then the third course, Wendy Kuhn teaches, where she gets down into the different modeling approaches and how they interrelate, how to use them, how to interrelate to successfully model and link strategy with project level execution. So that's the three courses. Each course is about 3 hours a day for 3 days. So it's really kind of hitting the major concepts. It's really a condensed version.
Condensed one, yeah.
Yeah. So we're rolling that out this fall, and it's remote delivery as well. So we can deliver all over the world. We're using, we're not using Zoom. We're using WeConnect. If you're familiar with WeConnect, it's like the Lamborghini of remote delivery solutions for education. Yeah. So it's a high quality, highly interactive environment, but we deliver from special teaching studios. So we're actually teaching and walking around, drawing on whiteboards, etc. But the students can interact with one another and with the faculty almost as good as if they were sitting in the room.
Nice.
Wow, that's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah. So we have I can send you the link to the website.
Yep. Please do that. We'll post.
You can also the recording of this will be as an event also available on LinkedIn, so you can also comment there. So all the participants will see it as part of that as well. So we're coming to the end. Any final question, Gene? Any final thoughts you want to share? Please get that in. Other than that, there's also I think it's next week. We do have the webinar with you where we go into a few slides and a few more in-depth on some of the topics that we kind of like more free flow discussed today. So sign up for that as well. We're happy to have you all come to that as well.
Yeah, and maybe Brian, you could just give us an overview of those courses. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll bring more information along on the courses and then the thinking behind the courses, and yeah, I will definitely do that during the webinar.
Because this would be a great platform to preview, the course, and so get people to sign up.
Okay, I will do that.
Awesome. Great. Because it's something that we want to do with this and all our events is also to kind of like build a community, share knowledge, make sure we also build a bigger capacity in kind of like people knowing about where issues are, but also how to overcome them. And so that when they hit those bumps that you mentioned with the strategy execution, give them some ideas about how to overcome it, so that like we all are more effective in our organization. So it's really about kind of like building that knowledge out in many of us. So any final thoughts?
Just one, and it's going to poke a bear with Brian. So organizations on board, you'd combine BA and EA and really put a wrapper around that. Would you consider putting something up similar to FIPO, because that was international? It's a federal.
Boy, Gene.
So just a thought.
It's Wendy and I have discussed this a bit, but honestly, both of us don't have the bandwidth. FIPO was a huge effort. In my current role, I wouldn't have the bandwidth. I do think, though, I'd be happy to, if anybody's interested in doing this, I'd be happy to, lend some thought behind it. I think there is a need for a professional organization that brings together the best of business architecture with the best of strategic planning. And I don't find those two worlds want to come together on their own. So I think there's an opportunity for more of a strategy execution professional organization. So the strategic planning organizations are primarily strategy development, and that's primarily what we teach in higher ed. I think there's an opportunity for a strategy.
Unfortunately, my screen just died. So, but we should talk. We should talk. I think it's.
But I am not going to be the person to launch that. At least not at this point in my life.
Okay.
Okay, then we ask next week again.
But Gene, if you want to do it, I will help you.
Yeah, I think we went down that path.
Two ex-FIPO presidents here talking about it.
That was, as you know, that it's a tremendous amount of work to get something new started. But Gene, you and I have talked about this with FIPO. We met so many good people that we still keep in contact with. There's a lot of good people out there that I think would resonate and become part of this. But it's a huge effort to get started.
It is.
Awesome. Then thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian, for your time today and all the great insights. And I can totally understand how you kind of like moved more to the strategy development because the bottom up is not working. So totally agree on that. And thanks for sharing. Thanks for building the community here, and looking forward to next week.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. Then have a good one. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you.